We can start with, here's an interesting question, Joe. Have you ever encountered a situation where a high potential leader went through the action learning program, and through the program you realized that they weren't cut out to be the next executive? I mean, could the action learning program you're describing actually be a weeding out process?
Yes, in fact, Peter Chalk mentioned that when he was talking about some of the people who had sort of opted out of wanting to move up through the leadership ranks. I was working with an organization once who were developing leaders through an action learning process, and one of the participants was a very highly structured perfectionist type who liked to have complete control over all situations. And she decided against further promotions. She realized it was too difficult for her to collaborate, delegate, and let go in some circumstances.
That's interesting. Let me see. We have another question here. Have you ever worked with a company where some of the executives were uneasy about discussing the idea of who would replace them? And how, if you had, how would you handle that situation?
Well, you're right. Some executives don't want to think about that because they don't want to think that anybody would do as well as they will do, or they don't want to think about that day that they may be leaving. So that's one of the things that makes the development of a pool of people, developing a pool of people for leadership jobs in general works more effectively. You can be doing that so that participants in that developmental pool will be able to move into a number of different key leadership positions depending on what's available and when.
Here's another question, Joe. Do most executives retire and leave the company, or do they take on different roles, just cutting back on their schedule?
Well, I think what we've seen recently is a lot of executives who are retiring. As you know, we're at that demographic situation right now where there's so many people retiring. And I've seen a lot of executives who move into consulting positions in and outside the organization that they came from. And some, want to be helping the organization that they were with because they carry with them a lot of knowledge, and they even work on transferring that knowledge, taking some time after they retire to transfer that knowledge to others in the organization.
Good. Let me see that. There's another question we have. You touched on how it's more efficient to develop a leader from within. But what if you've already brought somebody on from the outside who did not turn out to be the type of leader you were looking for? How do you begin looking within the company for a replacement and avoid a similar situation?
Well, you want to do that by building skills needed to succeed in that position through the succession management process. And again, as I spoke about before, you can be building those kinds of skills within a pool of people that you're accelerating their development, so that you'll have someone who will be able to move into that position where maybe this person you hired from the outside didn't work out so well.
Good. Thank you. There's another question we have. Do you have any recommendations for documenting the organization's succession plan in writing?
Well, when I work with organizations, and when Caliper does, we certainly document everything that has to do with the succession management system. What the mission and the goals are, what the business drivers are, why it's being done, what the process is for nominating and developing high potential leaders within the organization, and so on. So yes, I don't have any particular template for that, but you absolutely want to document everything that you're doing, because it's very important for the whole organization, I think, to understand what kind of program you have. It really helps people understand that they're working for a company who cares about developing their people, wants to retain their people, and wants to see them grow within the organization.
And I like that very much, because you want to document it, as you say. And also what Peter said was just to say it. Saying it out loud changes the organization.
It's funny, but it does.
Right. I mean, the people there, they might not be, in other words, they've been tapped for their leadership potential. He started off there, saying that these are people who are definitely, I see them as future leaders. I don't know necessarily how right now. Mm-hmm. I'm early in the process, but I'm looking to these, and then the organization looks to them differently as well.
Yes, and you know, the important part is to look at them and say, what sort of growth opportunities do we have for these people? How do we retain them? What are their development needs, and so on.
Here's a question, Joe. In terms of the 6-step process you described for developing a leadership pipeline, what are typical timelines for showing results?
We try to work with organizations to show results in the first year of the program. And oftentimes many organizations, because they're large and because their resources are limited in terms of the developmental activities that they do, will have an annual program where they take a pool of high potential people each year, a different group, through the process so that many can have the opportunity to experience gain the leadership skills and experience the growth that others are doing.
It's a process, and it is continually evolving.
Yeah.
And part of it, as I hear you saying, is just to make the commitment to be in it.
Absolutely, and to really devise a way of making it objective. I would say that above all else. As long as people in the organization or the employees understand that the nomination process to be a high potential and the development process is really an objective situation, objective measurements, they get excited about trying to meet those kinds of goals and to be part of that world. When it's secretive, when nobody knows how these people get tapped, they're always thinking that it has something to do with politics of the organization or who they know, and that's not a good way to run a succession management program. So I always really highly advise using objective metrics.
And being very open about the process.
Yes.
Here's another question. When a company has a very flat management structure and is comprised of mostly salespeople, how do you identify and develop future managers without risking lost revenue?
Well, that is a great question. It's funny because I think sales positions, more than anything else, are the most difficult to be able to just observe performance as a salesperson and decide whether someone should be a sales manager. Oftentimes the skills in those jobs are very, very different. And many organizations make the mistake of taking their top salesperson and promoting them to sales manager. So we really try to help the organization understand what a salesperson's potential is to be a successful manager. And oftentimes it is not the person who's probably got the best numbers in sales. It may be a more mediocre performer, but one that has the ability to develop others, to lead and manage change, and knows how to coach people and get the best out of them. So we really try in that type of an organization to help the leaders understand who's got potential to move up into those management positions.
That's terrific. That's terrific. We have several more questions, and what we'll do, as we promised, is we will make sure that everybody's questions are answered. What I want to do now is, just for more information about succession planning, visit www.caliperonline.com. That's www.caliperonline.com, or email information@calipercorp.com. And what we'd like to do also is invite everyone to our next presentation, and please join us with HR.com's next webinar about action learning, which will be held on Tuesday, October 9th at 1 o'clock Eastern.
And we believe action learning is such a critical and important part of leadership development and succession management.
Terrific. And a copy of this presentation will be available to everybody who's signed up, and we certainly invite you to share it with your friends. Thank you very much. We will also have that on Caliper's website. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to joining you again next October 9th. We'll be talking about action learning, again at 1 o'clock Eastern. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You were terrific.